Welcome back to Serving Up Success. As always, Bruce Cramer, your favorite corporate cockroach. And I'm joined by my two brilliant co-hosts,
Angie Snowball, the Renaissance woman.
And I'm just going to call myself Dr. D this week because that's what Bruce and Angie keep calling me. So I'm Dr. D. Good to see you all.
and boy, do we have a show for you. We're going to be talking about why decision making feels harder than ever, whether it's hiring or priorities or growth, family or business. But before we get started, we have to introduce our favorite cocktail of the week. Angie?
This week we're drinking Midori Sours. If you're not familiar with Midori, it's a melon liqueur. So that's why I picked it. Summertime, melons, I thought it would be good. Just mix it with a little sour mix and over ice, and it tastes like a sweet tart. If you have those. Do you have those in England? Sweet tarts?
No, that's why I didn't introduce it, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Do you have watermelon?
We have watermelon, yeah, but they don't grow here.
Mars.
They grow several countries away. Maybe
the fact that watermelon is in the title of the drink, it's got to be kind of healthy.
Yeah, I think fruit's good for you, right?
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah.
All right, Angie.
All right. So today, as Bruce already said, we're going to talk about decision making. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this is because it does affect life, career, and business, and does from the day you're born. I mean, we're making decisions every single day since the day we're born. And the older we get, the more we start to weigh decisions because we've learned from the repercussions of decisions. And there's just a lot of stuff that makes it more difficult. And we're going to offer you several different tools. We're going to talk about several different researchers, things that they've found to help us with decision making and just generally understand the science behind it and how we can be better decision makers and take all the weight off of us. Okay, so that said, I'm going to jump right in with Dr. D, because one of the things we see now more than ever is decision fatigue. So with the last 3 episodes, we talked about burnout, and decision fatigue is a part of burnout as well. So Dr. D, why do we get decision fatigue, and how do you know? How do you know you're not just having a regular day and you just don't want to make a decision? How do you know the difference between actual like fatigue, like you're not making good decisions because you're tired of it, or just it's a tough decision I don't want to make today?
So two different questions there, and I'm going to go to the first part first, which makes sense, right? What is decision fatigue? And as usual, we can fill hours of content into these questions, but I'm gonna focus on this question because I find it really interesting. So I'm hoping everybody else does too. So decision fatigue, we don't get decision fatigue more than we used to. We just think we do. The context has changed, and the context has changed because the world has become more complex. So, but why would that matter? Why would it? It's because we are not geared to necessarily. We're not attracted necessarily to the most important tasks. Our brains are attracted to tasks which have this combination, the greatest combination of certainty, reward, completion, and safety, emotional safety. So whenever we are asked something, we are responding with this in mind, that there's a hidden calculus in our brains. And we're thinking, okay, how difficult is this task? Will I look stupid if I don't succeed? How certain is the success? How quickly will I get my reward? And what's the emotional discomfort involved? So will the tribe accept me? Because if they don't, I'm not going to do this task. So our hidden calculus is always based on that. So we are thinking that we have more decision fatigue than we did 30, 40 years ago, but we don't. It's just the world is even more ambiguous than it was. We didn't deal with ambiguity even when it was less ambiguous by a huge factor 20, 30, 40 years ago. And now, when it's really ambiguous, because none of us know which way AI is taking us, none of us know what the best, CEOs do not know the best path to take forward. So we want to make fewer decisions. We don't phrase it that way. What we say is, I've got decision fatigue, or I'm burnt out, or something else. But the reality is, we want to be accepted by the tribe. We don't want to make a mistake. We're not attracted to the most complex, difficult tasks or the urgent tasks. We're attracted to those tasks which make us look good. By and large, there are exceptions. You wouldn't include Bruce in this calculus because he heads towards those big tasks anyway. So, but that's what we're essentially doing. The world has become ambiguous. We hated dealing with ambiguity anyway, and now it's really ambiguous. We have decision fatigue.
What do you think about us getting lazy? Like, as you were talking about AI and stuff, I mean, I'll be dead honest. When there are times when I don't want to make a decision, I've really fallen upon AI. Like, hey, like the other day I was trying to make this little robot thing. You know how they have those automations to do some email stuff. And I'm using Claude now, but I've always used ChatGPT. So I got both of them. And I actually asked them, I'm like, okay, which one of you is going to be better at this? Because I just didn't want to go through the process of deciding. I was like, which one of you is going to be better and how fast is it going to take you?
So, Angie, all you're doing is outsourcing the decision. You were outsourcing the decision 30 years ago, but to another human, maybe another group of humans.
Oh, good point.
Or a friend after work over drinks. Or you're now outsourcing them to AI, but you're still outsourcing decisions you don't really want to take.
I like the way he said that. I'm not lazy, I'm outsourcing.
Well, there is a lazy component, but maybe we'll come back to that later. Maybe because I don't see in certain societies which are up and coming, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that they are they would be considered lazy. Maybe we're lazy because we're comfortable, but I'm not sure up and coming societies and countries who really want to catch up, I'm not sure they are lazy. I don't know. There's more research needs doing to that. But anyway, decision fatigue. I don't want to detract from the fact that people get burnt out. But there have been times when I was making bad decisions, but it was essentially because I was burnt out, as we covered, when we talked about it on another episode. But decision fatigue is a slightly lower order in terms of magnitude than burnout. So I'm really interested in this topic. I'm going to shut up because otherwise I'm going to talk for 4 hours. And everyone's going to shoot themselves.
I was going to shut you up, so well done. Oh gosh. All right. So that's kind of what it is. I think we've all experienced it, but I like the distinction you took us through there. Also apologize for my voice today. It's in and out. Bruce, let's let you talk for a while. I'll probably cut you off too, just so you know. We'll put it out there to start with. But looking back over your career, because this is one of the problems. The higher up you go in work, and really even in your family, the more you get kids or whatever you're doing, the more weight your decisions carry, and the mistakes can affect other people and whatnot. So what are some of the biggest mistakes, decision mistakes that you've seen leaders make over the years? You spent a lot of time in corporate. I'm sure you've seen some whoppers. You don't have to give names. You can if you want. That'd be more fun. But yeah, just what are some of the decision mistakes that you've seen, and how did that trickle down? You know what I mean? And that's because I think that's another reason why we hesitate to make mistakes.
Yeah. I the big ones that come to mind, and I epitomize this one: overthinking. And
yeah, you do.
And we got to be careful. And we got to be careful with overthink. Yeah. Not that I'm guilty of that, right? But what we got to be careful of, and it was interesting, you already brought this up. It's easy to outsource because of tools like AI and stuff. They can be of great advantage and very complementary to the decision-making process. But you got to be careful that you're not on and on asking additional questions or whatever and just overthinking. The other thing is waiting too damn long to make a
Yeah.
decision. Literally, that comes from overthinking sometimes, but also sometimes people will wait, especially if it's a difficult decision. And that is the worst thing you can do. As we've talked in prior episodes, action trumps waiting, because you can always pivot and course correct. But one that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's bit me in the ass a couple of times, is being overly optimistic. So if you're
Oh.
really passionate
Mm.
about something, it's very easy to allow your passion to dominate the decision-making process. And by that, I mean, if you're really passionate about something and feel strong and you're ready to, I know what we need to do, it tends to soften the due diligence. So a real example I had is in one of the nonprofits that I co-founded. We were planning large events to raise money for children right after COVID. And so we ended up scheduling 3 large events. This is with people like,
Brad
John
Paisley.
Fogerty from CCR, Foreigner, Cheap Trick. The list went on. And we were going to do concerts in Tampa, Orlando, and Fort Myers. And I love music, and I was sick of staying home. So it's finally nearing the end. I got all excited and go, oh my God, we got to stage these events because people will come in droves. Well, I got so hung up on being so excited and passionate about bringing people back together, that I failed to do my due diligence. And what happened is we found out in Orlando, Disney was still enforcing wearing the mask. So it wasn't going to be a real comfortable event. There was still a fair amount of fear. And what happened is we ended up having to cancel both Tampa and Orlando, lost at least $1 million
Wow.
in doing so. Let a lot of people down because people did get a little excited, but we didn't do our due diligence and realize people were still scared. There were still
Yeah.
large organizations enforcing, wearing a mask, staying apart, and fortunately, Fort Myers was a huge success. For whatever reasons, the DNA in this area wasn't scared, and we ended up selling that place out. But this is where passion takes over. Everybody gets excited. You let your guard down in terms of due diligence, and that's a recipe for failure.
So that's really interesting because that's kind of the next question I have. But real quick, you said something too. I had a great example of with not waiting too long to make the decision. And I worked for an automotive company at one point in time, and we would often run short on getting the parts to the where they needed to be on time, and we would ship them by rail, which was the cheapest, then by truck, and then worst case scenario by airplane to get them there, which was ridiculously expensive to take transmissions on an airplane. But what would happen was there was one particular person and he would just wait too long every time. And then all of a sudden, instead of spending the money on truck, we were spending it in air. And not only did this cost the company millions of dollars, it cost him his job. Because at the end of the day, somebody can, this guy, and we did have another guy who was the total opposite. He's like, yeah, let's just ship them wherever they go. But that guy ended up doing really well and is still doing the same thing today, and valuable. But the guy who waited too long cost everybody. And the trickle down effect was incredible on just waiting too long. It wasn't that he made a decision. Sometimes it was within an hour, but I'm like, just push the button. So we got to pay attention to that. But that brings me to my next question. So we've always, I'm sure a lot of people have heard the 80% rule. If you have roughly 80% of the information you need, make the decision and adjust as you learn. My question is, how do we know we've got 80%? what kind of advice would you give people to say, how do you know when you're just still gathering information or you're delaying the decision? How do you know when you think you have 80%?
That's such a brilliant question. Bruce should go first.
Oh,
I'm
my
thinking of an
God.
answer. I'm thinking of an answer. I think Bruce should go first. Okay, I thought of an answer. But Bruce should still go first.
No, you can go.
So I think I'm going to talk more about this in this type of question later. But I think a useful starting point is to allow yourself to crash and burn with poor decision making when you think you may be at the 70, 80, 90%. Crash and burn, because you will learn. You'll build up some sort of intuitive cognitive layer. It's heuristic, it's not perfect, but you're not building a nuclear power station or a hospital, so nobody's going to die. It's going to be fine. You get these decisions wrong because you're not hurting anybody. These aren't big decisions you're doing. So allow yourself to crash and burn, and then at some point you'll realize, hey, I'm 80% there. Hey, I'm not 80% there. You just build up that intuitive, subconscious, supercognitive layer within yourself. So that's my answer. But I've got more answers later.
That's a good one. All right, follow that one, Bruce.
Well, actually, he triggered some thoughts. So I think it comes back to making sure you have clarity around that decision you're having to make. And when I talk about clarity, specifically the consequences, he made a great point. If this is a situation where you can pivot, that it's not life or death, the consequences are not, significant, make the damn decision. I mean, if you're still gathering information and you feel you got the clarity around the decision and the consequences that you're going to face based on that decision, you're probably ready to go. If indeed there's a fear factor of, oh my God, we can't screw this up. It's, we can't repair this. If we get this wrong, we're doomed. Chances are you're not spending too much time. So I use that kind of as the filter, because you generally know, what the consequences will be of that decision, success or failure. And I always work backwards from that is how I do that.
Those are both good answers. Okay, so we have wrapped up pretty much the first section of decision making. Most likely we're going to have 3 of these. We don't have 80% of the information yet, so we don't know, but could be 4. But we have gone through decision fatigue, why we get it, why it feels different than it did at different times, how it begins to affect us, and use the takeaway tool of the 80% and how to judge a little bit of that 80%. So that's where we're going to wrap up today. And next week, we're going to come back to you with Bruce leading us with a very cool tool. One of my favorite tools I've gotten out of being coached was the Eisenhower Matrix. So jump in next week and join us to learn more about how to make good decisions. And until then, cheers.
Cheers.
Bye, guys.